Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty RoundTable Talk Show.
Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Happy New Year. Green's out. Tim Walz might be out. Thomas Massie might be out. Donald Trump's gone berserk. How about a car for everyone? And the United States attacking, it feels like, I know it's not true, but it feels like everyone. Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. I'm Sam Bushman. This is indeed Liberty RoundTable Live, hard-hitting news the networks refuse to use for January the 5th in the year of our Lord 2025. Promoting God, family, country, protecting life, liberty, and property on your TV and radio in the traditions of our founding fathers. The good Dr. Scott Bradley is with me. We'll be with him in just a second to help break down some of this news. But first, January 5th today, thisdayofhistory.com, January 5th, 1914, Ford announces the $5 a day. Yeah. You say, what? Everybody was getting paid around $2.25 a day, $2.50 a day, basically like 20 cents to a quarter per hour. And so everybody made about $2.50 a day or so, and they had to work 9 or 10 hours for it. Wow. Well, then Ford came out and said, hey, we're going to let everybody work an 8-hour day. So he reduced the day length, if you will, for workers to 8 hours. And he said, I'm going to pay everybody $5. Now you say, man, what an honorable guy. I'm not here to defend Ford necessarily, but he wanted everybody to be able to buy a Model T car. How much was a Model T in 1914? About $550. By 1916, it dropped to $360. And yes, indeed, everybody could buy a car. You do the equivalent of that in wages, $5 a day for work. In America, it's right around $19 to $21 an hour now as a comparison. More than the national minimum wage, more than most states' minimum wages. The fact is we've all lost prosperity, to say the least. In comparison to not only wages, but how about buying a car today? Well, if you make $19 to $21 an hour, you'd have to buy a car for about $18,000 to $20,000 as an equivalent. You can barely buy a bottom-of-the-rung new car for that. The average car sells for north of $40,000 nowadays. So in every sense of the word, we've lost ground. But what an interesting, legendary change in work hours, pay, and the list goes on the purposes that Henry Ford had for this. Check out this little video, and then Dr. Bradley and I will break it down for you. Here we go.
In the 1890s, and even in the very early 1900s, when Ford went off determined to manufacture automobiles, it was a very risky thing. No one really quite knew if this could be done. Well, there was a certain need for transportation innovation. Ford, like a lot of mechanics, engineering types, became very fascinated with the internal combustion engine. He tries to build this thing in his garage behind his house. It was very, very crude. It had one cylinder. It generated 2 or 3 horsepower. This was the first prototype of a horseless carriage that Henry Ford built. His early companies, the ones that failed, his investors wanted to build a car for rich people. Ford, from the beginning, wanted to build a sturdy, inexpensive car for the mass of Americans.
I have set out to build the best motor car for popular use. The first car affordable for the common man.
Henry Ford was about the democratization of transportation. You no longer had to be a Commodore to be able to go from one place to another.
Ford stood in marked contrast, I think, to a lot of the big business manufacturing figures of the period. He believed that working people should be treated in a humane way. They should get paid a decent wage. They should have a healthy environment in which to work.
It was Ford who instituted the $5 a day, who doubled the wage of his workers, that his workers were going to become his customers.
The Model T takes the American market by storm from the very beginning, and it's a tremendous success.
What Ford did was create a vehicle we could all afford.
Henry Ford created what became the dominant, the most important industry in the American economy.
Henry Ford was the most important business and entrepreneurial figure in the modern world, period.
Very interesting, ladies and gentlemen, to say the least. Dr. Bradley, you want to chime in on this one? A very interesting change right after the Federal Reserve Criminal Act of Fake Money was passed in 1913, Christmas time as well, right? Interesting.
Well, absolutely. But the thing that's very interesting to me is that Henry Ford has such a different perspective than what is generally held by industry and labor at this particular point. You know, Marx did this, workers of the world unite, you know, we're going to war against the bourgeois and, you know, all of this proletariat nonsense and everything. It's very interesting to me that some of the most synergistic relationships that should be natural, normal, appreciated, encouraged, right now are because of the communist perspective, being played out basically as a conflict-based situation. You know, men and women, husbands and wives, I mean, families. You look about labor and management, for example. The relationship is actually normal. Neither side can do well without the other. In fact, they can't exist without the other. And to have a forward-looking entrepreneur type business guy in Henry Ford. Now, that doesn't mean it stayed with his company or industry or anything like that. But a lot of times we get these union movements that want to burn the factory down, and then it's like, wait. Our guys are using this to feed their families. And so synergism is oftentimes set aside. And there's this conflict, communist, let's disrupt everything until we can make a living. And suddenly society is completely turned upside down. And that's how the communists have taken over. Ford was very forward-looking in how he did things. I was just doing a little quick calculation. Back in the mid-1960s, I managed a gas station in Montana and had this really cool deal that I'd set up with the owners. First 8 hours a day, I made $1.25 an hour. So that's, you know, we're talking $12. And the next 8 hours, first 8 hours were $1.50. The next 8 hours were $1.25. But I got 2 meals with that. So, you know, really, if you stop and think about making $12 in an 8-hour day in the mid-1960s is not that great an advancement in terms of what had happened in terms of the destruction of the dollar. And then today, as we look at that,
it was still tied to honest money back in those days. It didn't until 70, and we basically jettisoned the honest money mantra of the Bible, honest weights and measures, and we moved to black gold or oil as our tie the dollar to the petrodollar kind of a thing. That's when things kind of started to melt down. And later we'll get into this, but that's part of the reason that Trump had to make his bombastic move against Venezuela. We'll talk about that, but it's interesting how before the unions kicked in, Ford reduced their hours, gave them more money, and he had his own interest. He said, hey, I don't want to just sell to rich people. That's a pretty niche market. I want to sell to everybody, including my own employees. And the only way to get that done is to pay them what they're worth. When you compare that, it's between $19 and $21 per hour minimum wage right now, and it didn't even take a government mandate, Doctor.
No, it did not take a government mandate. And the idea that he was fostering is really we need to think through that even more deeply nowadays. If we make it so that things are priced out of the realm of anybody being able to pay it, who's going to have a job? And if nobody has a job, who's going to buy your product? I mean, it's a death spiral we put ourselves in. A good friend of mine grew up in the Oakland area, and he said when they started skyrocketing the minimum wage there, most of the kids his age could not get jobs because nobody could afford to pay them. And so we had a lot of industries that left Oakland, and we have a lot of, what shall I say, creeping rot in the infrastructure of the entire city. The broken down buildings, the junkyard lots, everything like that. But the fact of the matter is, it's a conflict approach to things rather than saying, hey, wait, we need each other. and we can collaborate and we can both succeed. And I think Ford was on that track back when he did this. And of course, there's been a lot of water under the bridge since then. And Ford oftentimes, in fact, just as another interesting side note, when FDR was going to nationalize or seize his automotive business and let the government run it, he said, fine, let's see how good of cars they can make and how efficiently. He knew they were going to get their butts kicked. And Ford was able to get FDR to back off. But that's just the thing that happens when we get socialists that are trying to basically mandate how life is run, and they do a crappy job.
We need honest weights and measures, ladies and gentlemen, honest constitutional currency, gold and silver, and we need good, honest leaders. That was an example from history. You're talking Liberty Roundtable Live, baby. All right, back with you live, ladies and gentlemen. The United States conducted a military strike in Caracas, Venezuela on Saturday, and they captured Nicolas Maduro and his wife, brought him to the United States. They're in New York now. They're supposed to head straight to a courtroom. I don't understand it for a bunch of different reasons. We'll get into all that starting now. Number one, so if you run a drug boat for Maduro or somebody else, they'll just kill you on the spot, okay? So you're a low-level drug runner. They'll kill you right on the spot, no trial for you. But if you're Nicolas Maduro, the head of a country, a sovereign nation, and they basically say you're involved in the same thing, then you get brought to the United States by force, and then you supposedly get a trial. I find that kind of interesting, to say the least. Lawmakers, sadly, were notified after the military action had already taken place. A serious, I'm going to say it again, serious constitutional breach, to say the least. Now, if I speak out on this, pretty soon Trump's going to tell you that I'm as horrible as Thomas Massie, and I'm the end of the world and the enemy of the whatever. It's all bogus. I'm telling you the truth based on the rule of law in the United States, and I'm also telling you the truth relating to international law. The administration basically cited that Trump, based on Article 2, as commander-in-chief, he has powers to do this, and he didn't need to seek prior approval from Congress. However, I submit to you that's a misreading, to say the least. Commander-in-chief, folks, is not, I repeat, not, commander of war. Article 2 of the United States Constitution designates the president of commander-in-chief, but listen, of the armed forces, but only over military force that Congress creates, funds, and lawfully authorizes. Okay, Article 1 of the Constitution, where it's congressional responsibility, explicitly reserves the power to declare war and initiate hostilities, if you will, squarely in the camp of Congress, not the president. This includes the authority to approve offensive military action, foreign invasions, or the capture or detention of foreign leaders. The commander-in-chief laws do not grant the president unilateral authority to start wars, launch attacks, or conduct foreign seizures at will. The whole purpose is to maintain civilian control over the military after Congress has authorized its use, ladies and gentlemen. Any military strike, invasion, or foreign capture without clear congressional authorization exceeds constitutional authority, regardless of political affiliation, justification, emergency claims, or international pressure. None of that matters. The Constitution, the supreme law, matters in America. Emergency powers do not nullify the separation of powers one iota, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, that's when we need the separations of powers the most. Don't think the Constitution is great in peaceful times, but jettison it in crisis times. No, the Constitution was designed to deal with crisis in a meaningful, law-abiding separation of powers so nobody gets too much power kind of way. Treaties, executive order, or international law cannot, I repeat, cannot override the Constitution, which does indeed remain the supreme law of our land. If war powers are exercised outside of the constitutional framework. The issue is not policy disagreement, folks. It's a constitutional violation with serious implications relating to the rule of law. The operation was led, they say, by Delta Force and involved explosions and low-flying jets. The Attorney General said they will face the full wrath of American justice on, quote, U.S. soil. Trump says the operation was successful and that the U.S. will run Venezuela until a, quote, safe transition can be put in place. Trump stated the U.S. will be very strongly involved in Venezuela's oil industry going forward. China condemned the operation as a violation of sovereignty. Brazil said the U.S. crossed an unacceptable line. France criticized the U.S. for violating international law. This is likely the most significant U.S. military intervention in Latin America since the 1989 invasion of Panama, ladies and gentlemen. This is serious. Trump, quote, we were prepared to do a second wave. This was so lethal, powerful that we didn't have to do that, though. We're out there with an armada like nobody's ever seen before. Senator Mike Lee first questioned the constitutionality of it, but then later he acknowledged Article 2 authority, he claims. The problem is, ladies and gentlemen, Lee's position right now and President Trump's position is this. It's procedural realism, not constitutional purity. And what I mean by procedural realism is, hey, and he gets stopped, he can do whatever he wants, right? If nobody else upholds their responsibilities, president can walk all over you, so to speak. You can defend without Congress, but you cannot conquer without it, is the general point here, folks. This is not a constitutional failure. It is a congressional failure, the price of which is exact overreach, to say the least. I would like to say that it's war crimes or criminal activity, but others would say no. If Congress lets him do it and he does it, at what point have we set a precedent? That's the problem. Article 2 allows the president to defend Americans, but it does not authorize regime change, conquest, or running another country without congressional approval. I don't even know that you can run other countries with congressional approval, but that's another topic. Article 2 makes the president commander-in-chief of forces lawfully deployed, ladies and gentlemen. This is serious because now we're talking about oil, long-standing ties. What connects what connects Venezuela with Russia? Oil, energy. I mean, they've been working on a lot of stuff together. Trump declared that the United States would then intervene if Iran kills peaceful protesters. So now we're taking on Venezuela, Iran, Russia. All I'm telling you is this is insane. Now the media saying, well, what does this mean for Mexico? We know Mexico is a big drug lane as well. He says, hey, the leader of Mexico is a good person, friend of ours, but yes, they're going to have to get their act together too. By the way, Greenland, we're about to take you over also. Trump has lost his mind, Doctor.
Well, Sam, I didn't get this gray beard just yesterday. This has been a lot of years coming along. And you'd say, well, Bradley, you've been around a long time. You've seen this happen hundreds of times, literally hundreds of times, where presidents have gone rogue, violated the Constitution. Congress has been completely spineless. They've stood on the sidelines and at most wrung their hands impotently as they've wept into their handkerchiefs. And this is absolutely one of the most egregious things that any president or a nation could do is a violation of this order of magnitude. And I am you say, well, you should be used to it. And that's basically how they're justifying this in all of their echo chambers and press conferences. George H.W. Bush did it this time in 1989. Obama did this with drone attacks. And, the Gulf of Tonkin thing, blah, 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 blah. And the fact of the matter is that we are on a very, very, very steep, slippery slope. And the fact that Trump is so blatantly open about this, I don't think I've ever said this completely and meant it. of a president as to say right now we have a rogue president. The instances that you just mentioned, whether it's bombing Iran again because of their civil disruption inside their place, or taking over another sovereign nation, or Colombia is probably the next most nervous country, and Mexico certainly should be. And if we're going to do this with a tin-horn dictator out of Venezuela, why isn't Xi Jinping seriously concerned? They say, well, we can't start World War III. Bravo Sierra people, you are there. You just don't know how you have completely violated it. I am sick and tired of tin-horn constitutionalists like Mike Lee giving a pass on these things. I'm sick and tired of being lied to. I'm sick and tired of having huge violations. I mean, I've got stacks, maybe not stacks, but a gob of material here where we could talk about the congressional responsibility here. We could talk about Federalist Paper 69 and what was clearly understood, the limits and bounds of the presidential authority. What is happening right now, people, is a violation of the very foundation of how the United States came into existence in 1776, because we relied on the Westphalian Treaty of 1748, which said all nations are on an equal footing, no second-class nations. No nation or supranational organization may interfere with the internal affairs of another nation. That's their affair and theirs only.
And what you can't do is say, just because this nation's tiny, we can do this to them, but if they're big like China, we don't dare do that to them. The principle is the same, and we got to understand this. We don't have a constitutional failure here, folks. What we have is a congressional failure, and the price is executive. Some would say overreach. That's a mild way. I would say flat out belligerence and flagrant violations of the law. Okay. I know Lee's position is procedure realism, they claim, but that's just based on we violated the law. We've committed so many criminal acts or acts of violating the supreme law of our land that it doesn't seem to matter anymore. That doesn't fly with me, folks, at all. The Commander-in-Chief Clause does not give the president unilateral authority to start wars, launch attacks, or conduct foreign seizures at will. That's not his authority, folks. He's acted outside of his scope and outside of his authority. We can be angry about it, but the sad part about it is nothing's going to happen because we've allowed this. Congress has failed and allowed this to go on so long that it's normalcy now. It's a tragic, flagrant violation of the Constitution. More in seconds. Liberty Roundtable live.
Has been wisely and correctly stated. The government is not eloquence, it is not reason, it is force. And like fire, it's a dangerous servant and a fearful master. That's the basis of what constitutions are designed to do. They are designed to limit and bound the exercise of power by those that hold it by necessity for the assignment we've given them. And so our Constitution has limits and bounds. It has checks and balances. It has separation of powers. It has areas over which they cannot step and remain in office, literally. And so what we have is the United States was created on the basis of law. And the founding fathers of 1776 relied upon a treaty that had been signed in 1648 called the Westphalian Treaty of 1648, oddly enough. And they agreed, all the signatories to this, and by the way, the United States was not the United States at the time, but this was international protocol. And that agreement was that no nation is a second-class nation. All nations are on an equal footing. No nation can have intervened within their nation from outside forces, be it another nation or a supranational organization, something that intervenes in their internal affairs. We used that as the basis of the actual founding of the United States in 1776. If we were a sovereign nation, we would stand independent and be a nation among nations. Well, we've violated every single solitary aspect of that. Now, when it comes to presidential power, the president does not have authority to do all the things that he is claiming to do, whether it's do tariffs or spend money that have not been constitutionally authorized. In Constitution, Article 1, Section 7 says, here's how you pass a bill, Here's the stuff that you make it legal to spend money. And they're all limited within the bounds established within the Constitution. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 says you can't spend money unless it has been legally authorized. Okay, so what are we doing? Whether it's the 1776 Freedom Bonus or Warrior Bonus or whatever the heck Trump is calling it, or whether it's international intervention with nations that we have no authority to cross their barrier, their boundary, and intervene in. And we are on such thin ice. Think about this for a second, Sam. I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu currently has indictments against him from numerous sources. Okay, so what would happen if somebody sent a Delta Force in to Tel Aviv or wherever the heck his summer home is, and rappelled into his back patio and grabbed him and took him? We would have World War III. People would say Netanyahu is a sovereign leader of a sovereign nation and can't be intervened. Okay, people say, well,
and what if the same thing happened to President Trump, ladies and gentlemen, or any of these large standing, quote, NATO ally countries or whatever else? And it's important to understand this can create World War III, even though it's a tiny country. Let me explain how. Whether it's oil, arms, long-standing ties, Russia and Venezuela have had increasing ties for many, many years now, folks. This is a blatant escalation that I don't know that we'll be able to back away from, Doctor.
No, I agree. And I think Colombia's got to be my dang nervous right now. Mexico should be nervous. I mean, Cuba.
And the headline from Josh Phillip over at the Epoch Times today says this, to make your point about Mexico. Trump suggests Mexican drug cartels could be next after Venezuela strikes. So all I'm telling you is, who are we not picking a fight with, Doctor?
Well, and that's the thing. And what you're getting is apologists. We have weak-kneed, willy-nilly senators like Mike Lee that give him a pass, but he's by no means the only one. And by no means is he the most aggressively supportive of Trump on this. But if you're going to be a Trump toady and you're going to allow that to happen, here's what Madison said. There's great security against a gradual concentration of the several powers of the same department consists in giving to those who administer each department the necessary constitutional means and personal motives to resist encroachment of the others. The provision for defense must, as well in all cases, be made commensurate with the danger of attack. Ambition must be made to counteract ambition. The interest of the man must be connected with the constitutional rights of the place. So, Mike Lee, as an example, a member of the legislature, a senator, sworn officer of the nation, and Trump takes power from the legislature, it should be pushed back on. It can't be allowed to stand.
And I agree with you. You're right 100% on the facts. But again, Mike Lee's position is what they call political realism, which means, hey, the ideal is what you're saying, the law is what you're saying, but we've broken the law so much so to where we've allowed the president increased powers, stolen powers from Congress for so long over so many presidents that it's kind of become acceptable now. It's not really the law, but it's kind of okay. And see, that's where, in my opinion, Lee's capitulation is so disastrous, because it makes it sound like that kind of behavior is okay. Just because you commit, in my opinion, violation after violation after violation, and it's been going on for a long time, it doesn't make it any more right. In fact, it just makes it more wrong. And that's the problem with the expanding executive branch at the expense of Congress. Congress is the one at fault for this. They can rein in the president right now and say, no, 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 no. How dare you attack this country? Notify us afterwards. Claim you have that authority. You clearly don't. Just because past Congresses have failed in their duty, that doesn't mean we will. We'll uphold the law. That's what should happen. But see, if you're an attorney or a potential Supreme Court guy, you're Mike Lee, you're a senator, you don't want to stand too hard on that line because, hey, nothing's going to happen to Trump over this. Nobody will do anything about it except for wring their hands. The Democrats will use it and complain and use it for the election cycle, but nothing more will really happen. And that's kind of Lee's point in the realism discussion. It's wrong, but that's really where we sadly are in America today, Doctor.
Well, it's time for Congress to start growing a backbone. It's time. It's past time, way past time. But here we are. Listen, we are having powers usurped to the point that a monarch never had this much power. let me just read you another little statement by James Madison. The accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or many, and whether hereditary, self-appointed, or elective, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. And you say, oh, well, it's been going on a long time. Clear back in Jefferson's day, he recognized that where they keep violating these principles is done by design. And it's tyranny is in their mind. Maybe not even the back of their mind. Maybe it's at the tip of their tongue. But people that are doing this are just shoveling our liberty out the door. And I'm just so sick and tired. I've watched so many interviews of apologists.
The problem for Trump is I don't think he understands the Constitution really. And he's got too many, in my opinion, war hawks whispering in his ear. This war on drugs is an absolute failure. The more we push back and spend money on the war on drugs, the more drugs seem to come into the country. I think it's like the old 80s pop song, you know, when the wrong word goes in the right ear, I know you've been lying to me. These people have been basically manipulating Trump from the get-go. The deep state loves war. The military-industrial complex loves war. Trump ran on a peace policy. Yeah, he's been around the world, you know, advocating for peace in some ways, but now he really has to own that he's the war president. He's kept the Biden budget in place for literally the whole first year in Congress. The first year of Congress, and he's had control as president. He's kept that budget rolling. Anybody who opposed that budget was an enemy. Instead of the Biden budget being the enemy, it was anybody who's Trump's carrying on of the Biden budget was the enemy. And then when it comes to war, yeah, we try to act like we're going to advocate for peace around the world, even though we shouldn't assume that position, because no matter what, you're going to create winners and losers and create enemies. Foreign entanglements are disaster. But now he's really, for the most part, kept up a lot of the war that was already underway, funded it, trained, armed people, and now he's going aggressor. So you wonder, is he just going to take over Greenland? And we might as well just take over Mexico and Canada and Greenland all at the same time, and Venezuela. And hey, Colombia's a pretty bad drug offender too. And we can just take over all of them and run it all. We can just run the world. See, and the other nations are going to see it that way. The blowback of this will never, ever de-escalate. It will only continue to escalate, Doctor.
There's no constitutional authority to do what Trump's doing. Period. End of discussion. Congress needs to grow a backbone. And you're absolutely correct. We are violating things that walking these things back are going to be really difficult. This gunboat.
I don't even think it's possible. I think it's literally possible if Americans would get involved and Congress would get involved. But I think there's too much money at stake and we've been sold out for so long. I don't think it's possible to recover this. Some say only blood will bring back liberty once it's lost. I don't want to go there in discussion, except to say that, hey, history proves we're not going to get that back, Doctor.
No, gunboat diplomacy is not going to work, and we are whole hog on this. There's even talk of Cuba being, brought to collapse and so on, and that's a long, complicated story there too. But these people
2.0, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, but the thing is, Colombia realistically has probably brought 10 or 100 times more cocaine into this country than Maduro ever did. So why isn't Colombia shaking in their boots?
All right,
why should Mexico?
Liberty RoundTable Live, Dr. Scott Bradley and yours truly continue on the one and only hard-hitting, tell it like it is, truth-telling Liberty RoundTable Live. In my opinion, there's very few heroes in Congress, but I personally believe Thomas Massie is one of them. He stood for the Constitution more than just about anybody there. But now Donald Trump doesn't like Massie because Massie wanted to see the Epstein files, because Thomas Massie doesn't want to go to endless wars, and because Thomas Massie wants to obey the Constitution. He's now Trump enemy number one. Green is on the top of the list, but see, Green's out now. Her last day is today. But now they're relentlessly attacking Thomas Massie. And this goes beyond Trump just making a statement like, oh, we're going to challenge you at the primaries. Now the challenge is real. The guy's name is Ed Galrine, I think is how you say it. He's raised $1.2 million in the fourth quarter to challenge Kentucky Rep. Thomas Massie in the November midterm elections. So they want to get rid of Massie. Gallery, this Kentucky farmer and former Navy SEAL, received the endorsement from Trump back in the primary time. And the president's political group, it's called MAGA KY, or Kentucky, focuses on unseating Massie, who has been a, quote, notable critic of Trump. Contributions to MAGA KY include $1 million from Paul Sanger and $750,000 from a, quote, super PAC linked to Miriam Adelson. So Adelson's now dead. He was a big Nevada rich gambling guy with plenty of money, fundraiser, contributor guy. Anyway, he's dead, but now his wife contributes. Massie, who opposed Trump's major, what do you call this? Legislative act. See, Trump is involved in kind of legislation by twisting arms and everything else, and his policies on Iran and pro-Israel lobbying. Okay? So there you have it. He's against the promotion of Israel. He's against the tampering in Iran. I'm sure he's against this effort in Venezuela. But now they say he has $2 million in cash. Massie hasn't released his fourth quarter numbers yet. So the bottom line is the attack on Massie is not just rhetoric from Donald now. They're putting real money to unseat Thomas Massie. Doctor, this to me adds insult to injury, though. We're now drumming the good people out of Congress. No wonder Lee didn't want to stand up, huh?
Well, that's absolutely the case. What we're doing is we're getting a backboneless, spineless, knee-jerk response in favor of Trump. Anybody that doesn't favor him, personal loyalty is the most important thing in his mind. All of these kinds of things. And what's really disheartening is that the voice of the people may choose the wrong thing. Oh, let me say something. I know we can't spend the rest of our lives on this particular issue, but I'm going to tell you, I am very concerned that we are building a military caste to run our whole nation. I mean, you look at Hegseth and Rubio and the generals. I've seen so many generals and retired officers talking about this Bravo Sierra that's going on out of popular demand in Venezuela. We had an old saying, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And what's happening today is we're getting so many hammers into stuff that there's going to be a lack of ability to do anything except for pound the nail home. And we just need to start to understand that is not the way America was designed. I know there's been a lot of times, Tippecanoe and Tyler too. I mean, you go clear back and figure out where the generals, Andy Jackson, all these guys got popular. But the fact of the matter is, if we're going to use gunboat diplomacy, if we're going to use the hammer and the nail kind of thing, and we're filling our entire government with these kind of mental cases, I guess I should call them, the problem is that we're going to be in more and more cases where we're driving the nail home with a hammer. We can't have everybody be a hammer. And I'll just give you one example. I know we probably got to leave this pretty quickly, but in the JFK, John F. Kennedy era, and the Cuban Missile Crisis, and all of the hammers in the room with JFK were saying, we got to go in, we're going to have an invasion, we're going to go boots on the ground, blood everywhere, all that kind of stuff. And JFK said, no, we're going to figure out another approach. He overruled everybody, and somebody needs to start doing that in this nation again.
Amen to that. There's no doubt about it. So, ladies and gentlemen, one last point, and I don't know if we can get this video ready in time. Michael and Zach, hopefully you can get this video ready. But Mayor Mondami, or however you say his name, quote, we will replace the frigidity of rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism. Let me say that again. We will replace the frigidity of rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism. This socialist is off his rock crazy. And Trump had a big old, kumbaya with him and sat down, and that guy's awesome. But Thomas Massie is the end of the world. Horrible guy. I mean, this is just, I've gotten to the point where I have to say, I've got a serious problem with MAGA. Now, MAGA Kentucky is spending time trying to get rid of Massie while we're praising this Mondami guy, this flat out socialist. Here's the video when he became, quote, mayor of New York City. Here it is.
We will replace the frigidity of rugged individualism, the warmth of collectivism. If our campaign demonstrated that the people of New York yearn for solidarity, then let this government foster it. Because no matter what you eat, how you pray, or where you come from, the words that most define us are the two we all share: New Yorkers. We will draw this city closer
There you have
together.
it, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Bradley, what do you say to this? I mean, Trump was literally praising this guy.
Trump is a deal maker. I'm absolutely convinced of that now. I cannot see a soundly founded decision he has made based upon baseline principles that this nation was founded on. This Mandami guy, I mean, come on. You know, Lenin and Stalin used to talk about the peace of the grave. They're going to bring peace, right? It'll be a cold grave that they put the American economy into if they have half a chance, because they're going to redistribute everybody's wealth. The problem is you ultimately, as I think it was Margaret Thatcher said, you ultimately run out of the other guy's money that you're spending. No, there's so many screws loose, so many things wrong that are going on right now. And when you talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene bailing today, when you talk about Massie's on the edge of falling off the cliff because of Trump's anger, what we're doing is we're reaching a point where we will not be able to survive a nation because we have abandoned the principles the nation was founded on. And I am so discouraged about it. Again, I wish we could spend hours on some of these.
And I'm not too discouraged, only because I believe that there is a righteous contingent in America that's growing. Even the young people are starting to go back to church and turn to God more than ever before. And really, rather than save the nation, although I want to preserve the nation to the best of my ability, and I'll do my very best to make that happen. In the end of the day, though, my goal is to create a contingent of people who are living the commandments of God Almighty, who want God, family, and country to run as intended by our founders and as God Almighty has set forth in Scripture. And I want to prepare people for Christ to return. And that's a big order. That's a tall order. And the more religious liberty we have, the easier that will be to accomplish. Let's be clear. And every other liberty is downstream from religious liberty. And we're losing religious liberty left and right in America. You can literally persecute and prosecute Christians, and Trump does nothing. You go ahead and have these foreign nations, and Trump wants to be at the center of it all for some reason. I think Donald Trump needs to really come back and talk about some domestic reality, and he needs to highlight and promote the separation of powers, not obliterate them. And he needs to work domestically to make America first. When we basically take over a foreign nation and say we're going to run it, I don't see how that's America first. And I feel bad for Greenland, who's begging Trump to back off and stop the abusive rhetoric of taking over Greenland. Canada should be in fear. Mexico should be in fear. As you wisely pointed out, Dr. Bradley, presidents in their second term internationally seem to lose their minds. We're seeing it with President Trump right now. And I know it's bad. Everybody's going to hate me for picking on Trump like this. But the chips have got to fall where they may. Somebody's got to be a truth teller, Doctor.
Well, I know we're out of time, really, but we're going to mix God, family, and country a little bit with a statement by Noah Webster, one of the American founding fathers. And this statement exposes where we are right now. God commands you to choose for rulers just men who will rule in the fear of God. The preservation of a republican government depends on the faithful discharge of this duty. If the citizens neglect their duty and place unprincipled men in office, the government will soon be corrupted. Laws will be made not for the public good, so much as for selfish or local purposes. Corrupt or incompetent men will be appointed to execute the laws. The public revenues will be squandered on unworthy men, and the rights of the citizens will be violated or disregarded. I would submit to you that that's the condition we find America, where good and noble people are being thrown out because they have a different opinion. This is censorship. If you don't agree with Trump, you're going to be removed from office. And I can think of plenty of tin horn dictators that have handled business that way their entire dictatorship.
And ladies and gentlemen, we really fought against that all during the Biden administration, and we hoped it was over and that it would change under Trump. And all we've got is we're going to do it MAGA style instead of Biden style. Same spending plan in place, same agenda, different twist in many ways, but yet let's just do it the Republican way to violate the Constitution, not the Democrat way to violate the Constitution. I stand for upholding the supreme law of the land And I support standing with those who do so and against those who violate the supreme law of the land. I stand very firm, very clear, and let the chips fall where they may. For Dr. Scott Bradley, freedomsrisingsun.com, this is Liberty Roundtable Live, syndicated by Loving Liberty Networks, lovingliberty.net. God save the Republic of the United States of America.